On the guys on Proverbs 30, verse 21 to 28, we continue with the graded numerical parallelism, looking at this increase graded from 3 to 4, and just talking about the first part is just knowing your place. God's given us a structure, He's given authority, He's given an order, and He says we must submit to that order. And then when we placed in a position outside of what God's intended for us, we're out of place. Verse 21, under 3 things the earth quakes, and under 4 it cannot bear up. Under a slave, when he becomes a king, a slave has been given a position under a king. His authority is to the king. So if he's suddenly put in that position, he's out of place and may not be able to handle that position. And a fool, when he is satisfied with food, a fool is used to, as we're learning in Proverbs, doesn't gain much food. He's made bad decisions, and so when he suddenly gets given a lot of food, he may be prone to gluttony. Verse 23, under an unloved woman, when she gets a husband, so a woman who's been treated badly, who's had no respect or no love, suddenly she has a loving husband, she doesn't know how to handle that. Or a maidservant, when she supplants her mistress. You see a classic of Hagar and Sarah. Sarah couldn't have children, so she allows Abraham to have Hagar, the maidservant, and then there's all sort of complications that come out of that relationship when Hagar bears Abraham's child. The next part is from verse 24. 4 things are small on the earth, but they are exceedingly wise. And so in Psalms 8 verse 3, it says, when I look at the heavens, and that includes all of creation, the animals and everything, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars, which you have set in place. So what is man that you are mindful of him? And so we need to look at these things. Even in Proverbs 6:6, it says, go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Look at the ant, look at the creation, look at the order that God set up, because in that God has got the principles that He wants us to learn, because there's these principles that come through. And so it starts with verse 25. The ants are not a strong people, because you can just squash an ant under the foot, but they prepare their food in the summer. They don't just eat from hand to mouth. When there's rain and there's a lot of food, they store it so that they can have something to eat in winter. And so that's a wonderful principle for us to learn. Verse 26, the rock badger, or we would call it the hyrax or the dussie, are not mighty people, yet they make their houses in the rocks. Yeah, another wise animal. They're not strong. They can't just run away from a lion on a flat piece of ground, but they can hide in the rocks, and the rocks gives them protection. And so the wise man builds his house upon the rock. The wise man goes to the Lord, and his God is his fortress, his rock. Verse 27, the locusts have no king, yet all of them go out in ranks. It's interesting that they can together, thousands and thousands, millions of locusts can all in one accord march through a land without a leader, without a king. And so we don't need to rely on men, we need to rely on our King Jesus. And we listen to Him, and we follow His call to fight and to march. Verse 28, the lizard you may grasp with your hands, yet it is in the king's palace. So they consider the geckos quite a soft creature. Just grab it, the tail falls off, not something to be scared of, and yet it's found in king's palaces. And so you can grasp it, you can lock it up. And so when I think of this, I think of Joseph and Daniel, easily caught, locked up, Joseph thrown in the pit, Daniel taken in captivity, and yet both of them rose to power and were in the king's palaces. And so when it doesn't matter how mighty you are, when you're faithful to the Lord, He can raise you up. When you're humble, He can raise you up in due time.